December 1944. So wait 15 hours. POW camp near Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. Snow falls light and steady. A German sergeant, 28, Afrika Korps, captured in Tunisia 18 months ago, stands at morning formation with 200 other prisoners. American guards walk the perimeter, breath visible in the cold. The camp commandant, an American major, 50-ish, combat ribbons on his chest, steps onto a wooden platform. At ease, he says through an interpreter. The prisoners shift. They expect inspection. Maybe punishment for some minor infraction. The propaganda told them American camps were chaos disguised as detention. Guards who humiliated prisoners, forced them to grovel, treated them as subhuman. Instead, the major pulls out a clipboard. Christmas furlough program. If you've been here 6 months with no disciplinary issues, you can apply to work outside the camp. Fair wages, local farms. Some of you may be invited to Christmas dinner by the families you work for. Your choice. Talk to your barrack leaders, the interpreter translates. Silence follows. Not the silence of fear, the silence of disbelief. The major continues. One more thing. The Red Cross sent packages, chocolate, cigarettes, writing paper. You'll receive them after formation. Dismissed. The prisoners stand frozen for a moment. Then slowly they break formation. The sergeant looks at his hands. He expects to wake up. This can't be real. But it is. Not charity. Not propaganda. Something harder to name, respect. If you want to understand how respect became policy, how restraint became America's secret weapon, subscribe now. This story rewrites everything you think you know about victory. German soldiers captured between 1942 and 1945 knew what POW camps were supposed to be. The Nazi propaganda machine painted a clear picture. American camps were brutal. Prisoners would be starved, worked to death, beaten for sport. The Americans, they were told, were undisciplined, prone to mob justice, race hatred, lawless violence. The propaganda emphasized racial mixing, claiming black guards would be used to humiliate white German prisoners. It emphasized American materialism, suggesting prisoners would be enslaved in factories. It emphasized revenge, insisting Americans would extract payment for every German bomb dropped on Allied cities. By December 1944, over 370,000 German POWs were held in camps across the United States, far from the front lines, scattered across farms and military installations from Texas to New York, from California to the Midwest. The prisoners expected degradation. They expected systematic humiliation. They expected America to answer German atrocity with American cruelty. What they found was something far more unsettling. A country that treated captured enemies better than Germany, treated its own citizens under rationing. After formation, the sergeant lines up with the others. An American corporal distributes packages, Red Cross boxes, stamped with the distinctive symbol. Inside, chocolate bars, cigarettes, soap, writing paper, a small tin of coffee. The sergeant stares at the chocolate, real chocolate, Swiss, expensive. A prisoner beside him, a young private from Cologne, opens his package and starts to cry. Not from sadness, from the cognitive dissonance of receiving luxury items as a prisoner of war. They're giving us chocolate, the private whispers. Why? The sergeant has no answer. But he keeps the Red Cross box. It becomes his talisman, proof that what he was told and what he's experiencing exist in completely different universes. That evening, he writes in a notebook he was allowed to keep. He writes, "They gave us chocolate on Christmas, while their own people are rationed. I don't understand this country. Here's what American command understood by 1944. How you treat prisoners today shapes how your own soldiers are treated tomorrow." The policy was explicit, documented, and enforced from Washington down through camp commanders. Full compliance with the Geneva Convention of 1929. Adequate food, shelter, and medical care. often exceeding minimum standards, work programs that paid wages, albeit nominal, and taught skills. Educational and recreational programs to maintain morale and prepare prisoners for post-war life. Protection from vigilante violence and mob justice. The objectives were layered. Security. Well-treated prisoners don't riot, don't attempt mass escapes, don't require excessive guard resources. Intelligence. Cooperative prisoners provide useful information about German military structure, morale, and capabilities. Diplomacy. Demonstrating adherence to international law pressured Germany to reciprocate in its treatment of Allied POWs, though this was only partially successful. Morality. The belief, articulated by Roosevelt and Marshall, that American values meant something, even in war, especially in war. Pragmatism. Many German POWs had skills America needed: farming, forestry, construction. Treating them well made them productive. By late 1944, the United States held POWs in over 500 camps and branch camps. Mortality rates were kept below 0.5%, lower than the death rate for American civilians. Caloric intake, 2,503 centicalories daily, more than many European civilians received. Work was compensated with scrip usable in camp canteens. Red Cross inspections were regular and thorough. Violations were documented, investigated, and corrected. This wasn't idealism. It was calculated policy rooted in American cultural values. The belief that strength shows itself through restraint, not excess. The barbed wire was the containment. Everything inside it was an argument about what America meant. The sergeant's first day in the American camp system, back in June 1943, shortly after his capture, began with bureaucratic efficiency that felt almost German. Name recorded, rank noted. Personal items cataloged and tagged. He was allowed to keep his wedding ring, his watch, a photograph of his wife. Each item received a number. He received a receipt. Medical examination followed. An American doctor, professional and brisk, checked him thoroughly. Malnutrition, the doctor said through an interpreter. Not severe, but we'll put you on supplemental rations for 2 weeks. The sergeant was issued 2 blankets, a towel, soap, a toothbrush, a mess kit, work clothes. He was shown to his barrack, a wooden structure with bunks, a stove, screened windows. The camp layout was explained: mess hall, medical clinic, recreation building, work assignment board, canteen. Rules were posted in German and English. At 1200, the meal bell rang. The sergeant entered the mess hall expecting thin soup and moldy bread. Instead, beef stew, potatoes, vegetables, bread with butter, coffee, an apple. He sat with other new arrivals. They ate in silence, slowly, carefully, testing the food for tricks or poison that never materialized. One prisoner, a corporal from Munich, finished his meal and sat staring at the empty plate. "This is more than I ate in a week before capture," he said quietly. No one responded, but everyone was thinking the same thing. Within a week, the sergeant was assigned to a work detail: agricultural labor on a farm 30 miles from camp. 12 prisoners, 2 guards, a farmer who needed help with the harvest. The work was hard but fair. 8 hours a day, water breaks, a midday meal. The farmer treated them like hired labor, not slaves. "Need these rows harvested by Friday," the farmer said through the interpreter. "Work steady, not fast." Fast work is sloppy work. The sergeant picked vegetables, green beans, tomatoes, squash. His back ached, his hands blistered. But the work was honest. At noon, the farmer's wife brought lunch: sandwiches, lemonade, cookies. "Eat," she said simply. The prisoners ate. One asked, through the interpreter, "Why do you treat us this way?" The farmer's wife paused. "Because you're working my land. Anyone who works deserves to eat. That's how it works here." At the end of the day, the farmer inspected the harvest. He nodded. "Good work. See you tomorrow." "Good work." Not good for prisoners, not good considering, just good work. The sergeant thought, they judged the labor, not the man. That distinction mattered. The first weeks, civilians in the nearby town watched the work crews with suspicion. Some had sons fighting overseas. Some had family in bombed cities. They had every reason to hate, but suspicion thawed. A shopkeeper, seeing the prisoners walk past, brought out water on a hot day. He handed it to the guard. For them, it's too hot to work without water. A woman at a church bake sale packed extra cookies. For the boys at the camp, she told the guard, even prisoners should have something sweet now and then. The sergeant witnessed these moments. Small gestures, nothing dramatic, but they accumulated. One Sunday, the farmer invited the work crew to join his family for dinner after church. The sergeant and 3 others sat at the table, awkward, uncertain, expecting a trap. Instead, pot roast, potatoes, conversation about farming, weather, the progress of the harvest. The farmer's teenage son asked about Germany, not about the war, about the country. The food, the landscape, the architecture. They talked, carefully, but they talked. When they returned to camp that evening, the sergeant tried to explain it to the others. They treated us like people, he said. Maybe that's what they are, another replied. People who remember we're people too. August 1944. A prisoner, a corporal from Hamburg, develops severe abdominal pain. He reports to sick call, expecting minimal treatment. Instead, the camp doctor examines him thoroughly and immediately orders transport to a civilian hospital. Appendicitis, needs surgery, now. The corporal is driven to a hospital in town. An American surgeon operates. The corporal wakes in a recovery room with a nurse checking his vitals. Surgery went well, she says through an interpreter. You'll be here 3 days, then back to camp on light duty for 2 weeks. The corporal stares. You did this? For a prisoner? The nurse looks at him. You needed surgery. That's what hospitals do. Over 3 days, the corporal watches American medical staff work. They treat everyone the same, soldiers, civilians, prisoners. No hierarchy of suffering, no discrimination in care. When he returns to camp, he tells the others. Some don't believe him. Others believe him and don't know what to do with it, but the story spreads, and stories shape beliefs. If this story is changing how you see war, victory, and what strength really means, hit subscribe. We're uncovering the moments that textbooks ignore, the human truths that shaped the peace. December 25th, 1944. The sergeant is one of 15 prisoners who accepted invitations to Christmas dinner with local families. He's driven to the farmer's house, the same farmer whose land he's been working. The house is warm, decorated with a tree, smelling of roasted meat and baked bread. The farmer's family greets him, the wife, 2 teenage children, the farmer's elderly mother. They shake his hand. They invite him to sit. Dinner is turkey, stuffing, vegetables, pie. They say grace. Everyone eats. The farmer's mother asks, in broken German learned decades ago, about his family. He tells her about his wife, his son he's never met, born while he was in North Africa. She listens. She nods. When he finishes, she says quietly, I hope someone is kind to my grandson. He's in France. The sergeant doesn't know what to say, so he just nods. After dinner, they sit in the living room. The farmer's son plays piano, Christmas carols. The sergeant recognizes the melodies, sings quietly in German while they sing in English. When it's time to return to camp, the farmer walks him to the truck. You're welcome here any time, the farmer says. You work hard. You're respectful. That's what matters. The sergeant shakes his hand. Thank you for everything. Merry Christmas, the farmer says. Frohe Weihnachten, the sergeant replies. He climbs into the truck. He tries not to cry. He fails. By January 1945, prisoners are allowed regular correspondence. The sergeant writes to his wife, I am well. I am treated fairly, better than fairly. I work on a farm. The American family invited me to Christmas dinner. They have a son fighting in Europe. They treated me like a guest. I do not understand this, but I witness it. Do not believe the propaganda. The Americans are not what we were told. His wife receives the letter in March. She reads it to her mother, to neighbors, to anyone who will listen. If the Americans treat our men this way, she says, perhaps there is hope. Perhaps when this ends, there can be rebuilding. The letters circulate through a network of families, quietly, carefully. In a nation choking on defeat, these whispers of contradictory truth find desperate audiences. If the Americans treat prisoners with dignity, the letters ask, what does that say about what we were told? What does that say about what we did? Spring 1945, the camp establishes an education program, English classes, history, civics, vocational training. The sergeant enrolls in English. An American teacher, a conscientious objector doing alternative service, teaches basic grammar, vocabulary, conversation. You'll need English after the war, the teacher says. Germany will rebuild. Knowing English will help. The class meets 3 evenings a week. 20 prisoners attend. They practice speaking, reading, writing. The sergeant checks out books from the camp library. Tom Sawyer, The Grapes of Wrath, simple texts with complex ideas. He reads slowly. He looks up words. His English improves. One evening, the teacher asks him to read aloud. He does, haltingly, with a thick accent, but comprehensibly. Good, the teacher says. Keep practicing. You're getting better. The sergeant thinks, they're preparing us for the future, not just holding us for the present. That shift from containment to preparation changes everything. March 1945, a work detail returns late. A young American guard, frustrated, shouts at a prisoner who moves too slowly. The prisoner doesn't respond. The guard shouts again, more aggressively. An older guard, a sergeant, intervenes immediately. Stand down, private. But they stand down now. That evening, the young guard is called to the commandant's office. The conversation is brief. You don't shout. You don't intimidate. The wire is the punishment. Everything else is us proving we're better than what we're fighting against. Understood? Understood, sir. Good. Next incident, you're reassigned. Dismissed. The story circulates through the camp. The prisoners discuss it. They discipline their own, one says. They enforce their own standards, the sergeant replies. Consistently. That's why it works. Consistency builds trust, and a trust over time changes beliefs. By spring 1945, the sergeant has been a model prisoner for nearly 2 years. His record is spotless. His work is exemplary. The camp staff begins easing restrictions. First, he's assigned as a crew foreman. He supervises other prisoners, reports to the American supervisor, manages work schedules. Second, he's given limited freedom of movement. He can walk into town on Saturday afternoons, 2 hours, unsupervised, on his honor to return. He walks. He visits the library. He sits in the park. He returns. Third, he's offered a choice. After the war ends, you can stay temporarily, work program, earn real wages, help with rebuilding before you go home. He considers. Germany is rubble. His wife and son are in a destroyed city. Staying might mean he can send money home, help them survive until he returns. He accepts. Trust, once earned, compounds. May 1945. The war in Europe ends. The camp receives news. Germany has surrendered unconditionally. The sergeant sits on his bunk that night and confronts the question he's been avoiding for months. If the propaganda lied about the Americans, what else did it lie about? The question is dangerous. It leads to other questions. About the regime, about the war, about the camps that weren't POW camps, about the things he heard whispered but chose not to investigate. Some prisoners resist. The alternative is too painful. But the sergeant leans in. He lets the question break him open. He thinks about the Christmas dinner, the surgery, the English classes, the farmer who said, "You're welcome here." He thinks about what Germany did to its enemies, to occupied populations, to its own people who didn't conform. He thinks, we lost more than the war. We lost the moral right to call ourselves civilized. The thought is unbearable, but it's also liberating. Years later, interviewed in 1988, he'll say, "The Americans didn't just defeat us militarily. They defeated us morally by showing us what we should have been. That sergeant who gave me a Red Cross package at Christmas, that farmer who invited me to dinner, they had every reason to hate me. But they chose restraint. They chose to see me as a man who'd been lied to, not just an enemy to be punished. That changed everything. It destroyed what I believed. Then it rebuilt me. Repatriation begins, but it's slow. Germany is occupied, divided, devastated. The sergeant volunteers to stay. He works on farms, in construction, earning wages he sends home. He corresponds with the farmer's family. They exchange letters for decades. When the farmer dies in 1971, the sergeant, now a successful businessman in Hamburg, attends the funeral. The farmer's widow hugs him. He always said you reminded him that the war was between governments, not people. The sergeant nods. He reminded me that humanity survives even when civilization fails. He returns to Germany carrying America with him, the farm, the dinners, the Red Cross package. He thinks, some debts you never finish paying, and that's exactly right. The sergeant, now elderly, now a great-grandfather, keeps a photograph on his desk. It shows him standing with the farmer's family, Christmas 1944. Everyone is smiling. He's in his POW uniform. They're in their Sunday best. His great-grandchildren ask about it. Who are they, Europa? The people who taught me that enemies can become friends. That defeat doesn't have to mean degradation. He doesn't elaborate. They're too young. But someday they'll ask again, and he'll tell the full story. About the Red Cross package, about the Christmas dinner, about the American farmer who invited a German prisoner to his table when he could have let him stay behind wire. He'll tell them that restraint, not revenge, was the real victory. That the Americans won the war twice, once on the battlefield, once in the camps. The photograph sits on the desk. It holds a moment, but it also holds a lesson. Civilization doesn't end when you lose. It ends when the victor forgets what they're fighting for. Before we close, if these human truths matter to you, if understanding how restraint shaped history matters, subscribe. The next story goes deeper still. Respect is not weakness. It is the hardest form of strength.